Hello everyone and welcome again to my retrospective, a bit of a long series I plan to make where I cover how my game got to this point. Today I'll be covering where the game started, the first level of course. After I ported the mechanics back to Godot 4, I began work on GrappleRun's first levels, the tutorial and Factory Funk. The tutorial is a holdover from the Godot 3 build, a simple set of hallways with text strewn about set in a grassy field, just like the current version in GrappleRun. However, there's a core difference. The text is embedded into the stage, not floating in the UI. This means you need to read it while subject.gr runs past. This, as you'd imagine, was pretty annoying, especially in the Godot 3 branch, where subject.gr decides he's got lore accurate speed, I guess. The next iteration altered the text to show up on the bottom of the screen, part of the UI instead of the world. This was better, but the game never paused to allow you to read the text, and the text didn't take up a majority of the screen. It worked well enough, but it was still quite hacky for something that's meant to introduce GrappleRun's main mechanics. The next iteration experimented with abandoning text, using a set of small signs in the stage to display info visually through iconography. This iteration also finally added the feature of the game stopping to allow you to read the sign, unpausing when you perform the action. However, soon enough, I would return to the text-based system. This is where the tutorial sits now, and even now, I'm still not happy with it. It's the shortest level in the game, and by far the weakest one in terms of gameplay. Not a great hook for a game. I do plan to revamp it, but this series is all about the past, so I won't be covering up my plans to revamp it until I get around to it. But for now, it serves as a perfectly okay tutorial to GrappleRun. The next level ramps up the quality quite a bit more with Factory Funk. The first level, and therefore the first time I tried to create a level design pipeline. Despite its flaws, it's still the one I use today, just heavily improved. The level design began with a sketch, a drawing of lines and symbols I drafted up in Krita. To this day, this is still the system I use, but now I use a much more standardized set of settings so I can import the drawing into Godot and almost trace the level out, following the lines one for one and adjusting things when necessary. But in GrappleRun's first stage, I hadn't thought that far ahead. Instead, I drew the sketch and kept it in a separate window, swapping between Godot and Krita to reference the sketch and draw out the level with my tiles. This would have been serviceable if I had a multi-monitor setup, but I didn't, and I still don't. So I manually switched windows without even using Alt-Tab in the beginning. Horribly inefficient, but it worked. Speaking of inefficiency, there is a function in Godot called auto-tiling. Simply by drawing a vague shape, the correct tiles will fill in themselves, adding edges and corners automatically. Sounds like a super good feature. Which I didn't use! And I didn't use it for a very long time for no real reason. I just didn't know how to configure auto tiles because they changed them since Godot 3, and I never ended up figuring it out, I guess, until about the last levels. So throughout the levels, I placed each edge and corner tile individually. So after that mess, I add the objects, being things like grapple points, checkpoints, and trick springs, all on a separate layer. Grapple points are dead simple. I just put them on every corner because how else are you supposed to turn a corner without them? Trick springs are very situational in comparison, only in specific areas that I already defined in the sketch, so adding them doesn't take too much time. Checkpoints, however, are a different story. As I playtest the game, I'd notice where I'd commonly choke up and put a checkpoint there. That's it. That's my strategy for putting checkpoints in my game. From there, I draw the background, and this is a process that hasn't changed for the entirety of GrappleRun's development. I go back into Krita, sketch out a basic artwork of what the backdrop of this level would look like, and the trick that makes it a lot better is that I blur it. This is what the backdrop of Factory Funk normally looks like in gameplay, and this is how it looks like unblurred. The background is just that, a background. It needs enough detail to not look amateur, but not enough detail or clarity to distract from the gameplay in the foreground. Hence the blur. Some other fun facts about the game are: 1. The springs were originally ramps. This is their old sprite. Ramps were replaced by the springs in the final demo because I thought springs are cooler and the sprite ended up looking better. Checkpoints were originally going to depend on difficulty. If you played easy, you got more checkpoints than someone who played normal, who got more compared to hard mode players. I eventually decided against it because it just made harder difficulties much more tedious. Every level until about level 10 was tested with no internal debug mode. All of the levels were completed in one straight shot every time I wanted to test a feature. This worked at first, but the more levels I did and the longer they got, the more exhausting it became to test until I added the debug mode, which only really gives you no clip. Hey, but that means every level is verified possible, so that's a plus. Like all the levels, this stage is planned to get a revamp because, like the tutorial, the version of Factory Funk in the demo is technically good enough, but with some more actual effort into game design, it could be much better. The level pipeline was rough, and it only slightly improved with each new level until it reached its current form, including all of the comforts I added, like importing the sketch into the editor directly to serve as a reference, auto-tiling, debug mode, and placeholder tile sets I could replace with a few quick fill commands. But it didn't evolve fast enough. I did get very burnt out on level design, and since it was most of the work required to get GrappleRun into a finished state, I got very burnt out of working on GrappleRun in general, overall leaving me with a sour taste in my mouth that made me feel like level design just wasn't for me. This slump took up a major part of my development time, periods of procrastination where I just wouldn't touch the game. Maybe I'd open it, play for a little bit, and then go do something else, or I'd open the project, stare at the code base, and then close it back up. The tedious work of the early pipeline just felt exhausting, and it was one of the reasons I put off making real devlogs originally. I'd already done all the fun stuff I could have made videos about, and now all I'm doing with the game is just boring, busy work I can't fill a video with at all. In my mind, the average video would have gone like this. Hi everyone, I'm Annie from AnnieWorks. I finished up City Chaos. Woohoo. I placed some tiles and traced the level design sketch for about 5 hours, just like I did with the last 5 videos. I wanna die. And now I'm planning to revamp all of the level design in each level? Am I stupid? This is gonna be horrible. I'm gonna hate every second of this. But after thinking it over, I really don't think it's gonna be that bad. Even though I spent a lot of time making fun of and complaining about the early GrappleRun level pipeline, I've been mostly talking about the effects of GrappleRun's early pipeline. The current pipeline, while still a bit time-consuming, is not nearly as grueling as the early pipeline. While I was making the original batch of levels, I also felt like I was just going through the motions. Sketch into placeholders, into design, into background, into music, into being done. Over and over. I really didn't put too much thought into the sketch, drawing lines until they looked like a good enough floor plan. But this time, each level has a unique identity beyond visuals. Each level introduces its own mechanic and uses it to its fullest extent. On top of that, the set of mechanics I plan to build levels with is going to be way higher. In GrappleRun, currently the majority of levels only really have 3 mechanics: jump, slide, and grapple. While I love these mechanics, they are stretched so thin they've become completely dull. Combined with the fact that I never really had a goal for each level designing them, this ended up leaving a lot of dead air in the gameplay. Parts where you just run without any obstacles or turns because I just never added anything in them. In these new levels, however, the mechanics introduced in the late game are shifted to be added much earlier and distributed evenly, making it so that mechanics won't become dull from overuse and can be mixed creatively with others. Also, with things like decoration tiles, levels have a much more interesting visual identity too. All in all, while GrappleRun started off on very rough roots when it came to developer ergonomics, I believe the changes and plans I have planned for GrappleRun will not only make the levels very fun for the players, but very fun for me to design too. That's where I'll mark off the retrospective for today. If you enjoyed what you watched, please like and subscribe, but also check out the demo on my Blue Sky account for more GrappleRun. It'll be in the description and in the comments, and if the description links still work. See you next time!